I used to believe the strongest people were the ones who could walk away without looking back. I was wrong. The strongest person I ever knew was the woman who walked away without asking me to follow. A better woman is easy to find, Adrian Romano said, his voice calm enough to freeze the air between us. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. Every person standing in the dining room heard him anyway. Crystal glasses shimmered beneath the warm chandelier light. The city stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, glowing beneath a blanket of late autumn rain. The mansion looked exactly the way the magazines described it. Perfect, expensive, untouchable. But I suddenly realized a beautiful house could feel colder than an empty apartment. I stared at him, waiting for the slightest hint that he regretted the words the moment they left his mouth. There wasn't one. Adrian simply adjusted the cuff of his tailored black jacket and glanced toward the fireplace as though we had been discussing tomorrow's weather instead of our future. Maybe 6 months earlier I would have argued. Maybe I would have reminded him of every promise we had whispered during sleepless nights when the world outside his gates seemed too loud to matter. Maybe I would have cried. Instead, I smiled. It surprised him more than tears ever could. Slowly, I slipped the engagement ring from my finger. The diamond caught the golden light one last time before I placed it gently on the polished oak table between us. The tiny sound it made against the wood echoed louder than any shout. Neither of us moved. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass, steady and patient, as if time itself had decided to slow down. "Then I hope you find her," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. That was the part one would remember forever. My hand stayed steady even though my heart felt strangely weightless, like something inside me had finally stopped fighting. Adrian looked at the ring before looking back at me. His expression remained unreadable, confident, almost bored. He had spent years making impossible decisions without hesitation. Another one didn't seem difficult. "Claire," he said, exhaling through his nose. "Don't make this dramatic." I almost laughed. Dramatic. I thought about every dinner I had eaten alone while he canceled at the last minute. Every anniversary interrupted by another urgent meeting. Every conversation that ended with me convincing myself tomorrow would be different. Loving Adrian had never been dramatic. It had been quiet. Quiet waiting. Quiet hoping. Quiet disappearing. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair and slipped it over my shoulders. The familiar scent of cedar and coffee lingered in the fabric, reminding me of mornings that had once felt full of possibility. I walked toward the front door without rushing. The marble floor reflected every step like it wanted to memorize them. Halfway there, I paused just long enough to glance back. Adrian hadn't followed me. He was already reaching for a folder lying beside his phone, preparing to return to work as though I were simply leaving for the afternoon. Somehow that hurt less than I expected. It told me everything I needed to know. The cold night air wrapped around me the moment the front door opened. Rain kissed my face, washing away the warmth of the house behind me. I didn't call for a driver. I didn't take the luxury SUV waiting in the circular driveway. I walked through the iron gates carrying only a small overnight bag and the quiet certainty that I would never come back. Behind me, the mansion remained brightly lit against the dark sky, untouched by the choice I had just made. Inside those walls, Adrian Romano believed tomorrow would look exactly like today. He had no idea that some doors close so softly you never hear them until the silence becomes permanent. The next morning, I expected my phone to ring. Not because Adrian would apologize. Men like him did not apologize easily. I simply believed he would call to tell me to come home because, in his world, everything eventually returned to where he wanted it. Morning turned into afternoon. Afternoon faded into evening. My phone remained silent. Across the city, Adrian Romano stepped into the headquarters of his company at exactly 8 o'clock, just as he had every weekday for years. His assistant handed him a leather portfolio, filled with contracts worth millions of dollars. Executives stood when he entered the conference room. Investors waited for his opinion before speaking. Every decision he made carried weight. Every person around him watched carefully for the smallest change in his expression. They found none. Adrian discussed numbers, acquisitions, and expansion plans with the same measured confidence that had built his reputation. If anyone noticed the empty ring finger on his left hand or the absence of the woman who usually accompanied him to charity events, no one dared to ask. Control had always been his greatest strength. At least that was what everyone believed. Around noon, his assistant quietly mentioned that the florist had called to confirm the weekly delivery to the mansion. Adrian looked up from the financial report in front of him. "Cancel it," he said without hesitation. "There is no reason anymore." The words disappeared into the room like tiny stones sinking into deep water. His assistant nodded once and wrote the instruction down without another question. By 6 o'clock, Adrian returned home exactly as he always did. The front doors opened before he reached them. The staff greeted him politely. Dinner had been prepared with flawless precision. Everything looked exactly the same, yet something invisible had shifted. The piano in the living room remained closed. No soft music drifted through the hallways. The candles that Claire insisted on lighting every evening sat untouched on the fireplace. Their unburned wicks looked strangely unfamiliar. Adrian loosened his tie and walked into the kitchen. The chef asked if he wanted his usual espresso after dinner. He nodded automatically before stopping halfway toward the dining room. The porcelain cup waiting beside his plate already held fresh coffee, but nobody had added the small spoonful of cinnamon Claire secretly slipped into it every night because she claimed it softened the bitterness. He lifted the cup anyway. One sip, then another. Tasted perfectly made. Somehow it still felt wrong. He placed it back on the table without finishing it. Upstairs, the bedroom remained exactly as Claire had left it. Her side of the closet stood nearly empty, yet a single lavender-scented sachet still rested on the shelf. The faint fragrance lingered in the air, refusing to disappear. Adrian stood there longer than he intended. Not because he missed her, he told himself. Only because silence had become unusually noticeable. Before going to bed, he unlocked his phone and glanced at the message thread carrying Claire's name. The last text she had sent 2 days earlier was painfully ordinary. She had asked whether he would be home for dinner because she wanted to cook his favorite pasta from scratch. He had never answered. His thumb hovered over the keyboard for a brief second before he locked the screen again. Tomorrow, he thought. She needed time to calm down. Claire always believed in second chances. She would call first. She always had before. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The clouds drifted away, revealing a sky full of quiet stars. Somewhere beyond the city lights, Claire watched that same sky from a small hotel balcony, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. For the first time in years, she did not wonder when Adrian would come home. And for the first time in years, Adrian went to sleep inside a mansion that had never felt so large, never realizing that the distance growing between them could no longer be measured in miles. By the end of the first week, the city still moved exactly as it always had. Traffic crawled through Manhattan every morning. Coffee shops filled before sunrise. People hurried past one another without noticing the invisible stories unfolding around them. Adrian Romano continued to attend every meeting on his calendar. His schedule remained flawless. His appearance remained impeccable. If success could erase loneliness, he would have been the happiest man alive. Instead, small moments began to interrupt the perfect rhythm he had spent years building. One Tuesday evening, he returned home later than usual after a charity board meeting. As he stepped through the front door, he instinctively loosened his tie and waited to hear Claire's familiar voice asking whether he had remembered to eat lunch. The silence answered first. He stood in the foyer longer than necessary before quietly walking farther inside. The housekeeper greeted him with a polite smile. "Good evening, sir." Adrian nodded without stopping. He almost asked where Claire was before remembering there was no reason to ask anymore. The words dissolved before reaching his lips. Upstairs, the guest room door remained slightly open. Claire had once transformed it into a cozy reading room filled with soft blankets, overflowing bookshelves, and a comfortable chair beside the window where afternoon sunlight poured in every day. Adrian had rarely entered that room. Tonight he did. Dust had not yet settled, but the space already felt abandoned. A novel rested upside down on the armrest exactly where Claire had left it weeks earlier. A knitted blanket still hung over the chair. He reached down and absent-mindedly folded one corner before realizing he had never cared whether blankets were folded neatly before she came into his life. The habit belonged to her. Somehow it had quietly become his. Downstairs, Winston, the golden retriever Claire had rescued from a shelter 3 years earlier, remained curled beside the front entrance instead of following Adrian into his office. Every few minutes, the dog lifted his head whenever headlights passed beyond the iron gates. His tail wagged once, then slowly dropped again. Adrian watched the pattern repeat through the living room window. "She is not coming tonight," he murmured almost to himself. Winston